tuned in to the 2-Minute Warning, a live stream community conversation pertaining to social and political issues and how we can collectively resolve them. Powered by the Westside Gazette.
Good evening and welcome to the 2-Minute Warning, our social political live stream brought to you by none other than the Westside Gazette. My name is David Wright, and tonight I'll be sitting in for our dear brother Perry Busby. Perry, wish you well. We know all is well, but looking forward to seeing you and having you back on the show real soon. But with me right now is my dear brother, Mr. Bobby Henry, the editor of one of the biggest, boldest, blackest newspaper in Broward County.
I just love it when y'all give me all kind of titles. I really appreciate it. But it's good, my brother. How you doing?
I'm doing well.
Very good. I want to apologize for last week. We had some technical difficulties. When you run a tight ship, sometimes it's so tight, you put things in places that you don't remember, and then the equipment doesn't function like it's supposed to. So we had some technical difficulties last week and we couldn't come on. So we apologize for that. And then as humanism would have it, when flu season and allergy season and all that stuff play a part, our very large staff consisting of 2 people, when one goes down, we're in trouble. So we ask for your prayers and your consideration to remember we all are human and we are liable to error, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So tell me what's going on, man.
Let's start with some local stuff.
Okay.
And it's very good to see with all of this building and a form of gentrification comes into our neighborhood. It's good to see Black folk taking advantage of our real estate. And I want to commend Mr. Dennis Wright and Mr. Troy Walker for their foresight to see and take it into account to build in the neighborhood on the grounds where there once stood one of our prominent meat stores, Walker's Grocery, and then the legacy of Helen Kindergarten with Popsy and Miss Morris. So they've combined their efforts to build from the perspective of Wright's dynasty. They're building affordable housing, apartments. Affordable housing, and they're doing that. So brothers and sisters, if you're paying attention to this show, please read the article in the Westside Gazette and take advantage of it. It's the complex has all the bells and whistles and the amenities that would rate in any community. And we have the opportunity to take full advantage of that. So I would advise that you read the article and get in contact with Wright's dynasty and find out how you can own a part of this real estate. Yeah.
Yes, I had an opportunity of speaking with our dear brother Dennis Wright, and I was so amazed and so excited about this collaboration and this coming together. And he's just so proud to be a part of this and doing it right here in the heart of our community. And we have to do more of that.
Yes, we do. And let me say this. When you pick up the copy of the Westside Gazette, we made a mistake in the article. We combined Miss Helen Morris' name with Walker, but her name is Helen Morris and not Walker. And Dennis, I apologize. A part of your phone number is cut off, so we will rectify that. You can go to the website and see the correction, and the correction will be made in next week's paper as well. We are human, and I do apologize. I want to be the best. But sometimes we fall a little short.
Well, I think you probably got a little excited.
I really did, man. I'm going to go buy me some of that property.
Yes.
What's happening on your end?
So local news, it's important that we just continue to talk about things that's happening here local. Our guests are going to come on and definitely share a little more about what's going on here locally. But we're coming up on graduations, high school graduations. We've had a few college graduations just excited about our young folk. And we're preparing to do some shows centered around them to kind of give you an overview and an outlook on some of their achievements and how they're going to move forward in hiring their education and improving, hopefully, humanity.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, I thought you were going to say a little bit about the prosecutors dropping charges against Andrew Gilliam.
Well, that's on the list. That's on the list. Well, go ahead. That's on the list.
You deal with that.
I was going to take it from Broward. We can go to Tallahassee.
Oh, yeah.
And, so oftentimes charges are being made and brought up against, they did it against Runcie.
Oh, yeah.
So, oftentimes, and when I say Runcie, former superintendent of the Broward County School District, charges were brought up, and truly they probably didn't have a leg to stand on, but, sometimes, how can I say, the powers to be just kind of want to tarnish your name and your reputation when they have dislike for you.
Mm-hmm.
And our dear brother,
Andrew
Gillum,
yes.
has been exonerated. Charges have been dropped, and I'm wishing and hoping for a continued bright future for our dear brother. He seems to have his finger on the pulse of some true needs for our state.
Oh, absolutely, and that that verse in the Bible that says, "Who have not sinned, cast the first stone."
Mm-hmm.
The brother is extremely talented, and that's so I won't get into anything else. Also, we're gonna jump up a little bit and go to New York.
Okay.
The ex-Marine that thought he would be a savior and choke the young brother to death. He has been charged, and we'll see what happens from there. But at least he has been charged. And I wrote a piece, and we have to be mindful. And in this day and age, we all will probably be confronted at one time or another with either putting our lives in danger to save another, or just have our lives put in danger by those who discount us as a people. And I recall vividly an incident on Sistrunk with a mob of people fighting. And I looked in my rearview mirror and I said to myself, should I get out? It was some sisters. And should I try to stop this? And I didn't. So, and that bothered me for a lot of years. So I just want us to be mindful that we will be confronted, believe it or not, the way statistics have it and the way things are going, at one time or another, we will be confronted with either we will risk our lives at the attempt to perhaps save another, or just get caught up in a situation where we have no control over. But be mindful, whatever you do, it will affect you for the rest of your life.
It surely will. And sometimes the fight comes to you. Mm-hmm. And so there's no avoiding it. And in those situations, I pray we're spiritually led to do what's right. And then there are going to be those situations that some of us will encounter where we're going to be called on to act.
For such a time as this.
Yeah, for such a time as this. We've seen situations. I mean, we live here in South Florida. We've seen drowning situations where people have attempted to go in and save another, well, unknowingly, and sometimes they've lost their lives trying to do so. And I bring that up because we're coming upon the summer months.
Okay.
And here locally, a lot of swimming lessons are going to be offered, and we want our kids to get out, and our parents to get their kids out and get them swimming lessons.
Yeah.
Our community parks, our parks with pools, we have 3 that well, more than that. We have Riverland, we have Bass Park, we have Carter Park, we got Lauderdale Manors. Lauderhill has parks. So get your kids in the water. Help them to overcome some of those fears. I know there may be generational trauma behind a lot of water, but it's truly to our advantage to help our kids.
But if any, and I'm not being a racist, if any ethnic group or racial group should be some of the best swimmers, should be us.
Talking about shine.
Okay, on a bright note, an 11-year-old black girl has an IQ higher than Einstein. So the young sister, Ahara Perez Sanchez, a 12-year-old brown-skinned girl from Mexico City, one of the highest IQs ever recorded. Right on. Now, if I could, before we get into tonight's show, and for those who have seen the flyer and paid attention to it and, saw perhaps some sensational wording, that is on us. That has nothing to do with any one of our guests except the author who wrote the book. It has no bearing on our other guest who's a author in her own rights, an award-winning author. It is a book, and that's the title of a book. We don't want anybody to misconstrue or try to point a finger at our guests and trying to label them with anything other than what they bring to the table. Each one of them can stand on their own 2 feet and deliver for themselves what they have to say. So I want to say that, and I'm saying that emphatically. And so don't make no mistake about it. All right? So we're going to get into our tonight's show.
Go right ahead.
Well, I'm excited about this.
Me too.
Anytime you can have individuals who, first of all, record history, that's one thing. For those who dig and scrape and find the nitty-gritty about our true history, that's something else. And both of our guests tonight are authors. The first guest that we're going to introduce is Dr. Tameka Hobbs. Now, if you know anything about history, or you want to know something about Florida and Florida's history as it pertains to any lynching or any Afrocentric knowledge that you wish to understand, Dr. Tameka Hobbs is one of the persons that you should run to as fast as you can. We are fortunate enough to have her in our library system here in Broward County. As a matter of fact, she's over at the African American Culture Center and Research Library. Only 2 of a kind, right? Three. Well, I'll get it right. Only three of a kind in the United States. But Dr. Tameka Hobbs is an award-winning author. She has taught at several universities, and perhaps, since I'm a traveler of universities, black universities, I've been to the ones she's taught at. So I am familiar with her work. So without any further ado, coming from a hard day's work down at the African American Research and Culture Center is Dr. Tameka Hobbs. Can you come on the screen? What's happening, Doc?
I'm good, Mr. Henry. Good to be with you, Mr. Wright. Did you say you were a traveler of the universities?
Yes. Oh, yes. Can I just give you a little bit of history? I won a scholarship at Bethune-Cookman back in 1974. I left Bethune-Cookman and went to Florida A&M University, where I was trying to understand what it was like to be in this place of higher learning. So much so that my learning went outside of the classroom. So I had to leave Florida A&M University, and my degree is from Florida Memorial University. I was introduced to the Black college experience at Bethune-Cookman. I learned what a Black college was at Florida A&M University, and I exited with all of that from Florida Memorial University. So yes, Doc.
Well, we're going to have to get you to Edward Waters.
If you had managed a semester at Edward Waters, you would have hit all 4 of them.
I was trying to get there, but I finished too soon. No
That's
doubt.
all right. That's all right. Got love for them all. I'm a graduate of
Mhm.
Florida A&M. I taught there for a bit. Came down here to South Florida to begin teaching at Florida Memorial University. I've been there for years, and so I have worked everywhere except for Bethune-Cookman. So we have that. I'm a hopper too. I'm a traveler too in my own way.
But yeah,
Good to be with you
and
today.
and in your traveling though, you've uncovered a wealth of knowledge, and you presented some books, and how let's deal with where you are now. We know that there are things happening. You just left an event. You want to tell us a little bit about that and what's to come?
Absolutely. We just wrapped up a few minutes ago Haitian Flag Day celebration. It was the first of a series of 3 nights of activities here at the African American Research Library and Cultural Center. You had it right at first, Mr. Henry. It's
Thank
the
you.
Research Library first, then the Cultural Center. But we call it Celebrating Freedom, Haiti and Florida. And it's been a labor of love. I have always been intrigued by the proximity on the calendar of these 2 very important emancipation holidays. May 18th, 1803 is the day that Jean-Jacques Dessalines adopted that famous red and blue banner by tearing out the white part of the French flag. And so it's celebrated as Haitian Flag Day. So that today was the 220th anniversary of that occasion. And to be able to invite our local Haitian American community into the African American Research Library for a celebration was really beautiful. It was a bit of celebration, but we also were treated to a very important lesson on his history and the current politics of Haiti by Paul Christian Nampi. He is with the Family Action Network movement down in Miami, has worked with Marlene Bastien for years.
Yes.
And he really vivified for us the history of the Haitian flag, but more importantly, the history of the political regimes and the coups that have taken place on the island, including the current state of events. And today there was a call to action for people to begin to raise their voices and to put pressure on not only the international community, but the U.S. government to do more and pay more attention to help with the stabilization of the nation and to aid those who are fleeing the violence there. And so even with that seriousness, there was storytelling, beautiful festivities. We were very proud to do that. Tomorrow night, for many residents, you may be familiar with our Destination Friday programs that we have had here at Arlick. Well, tomorrow we're going to be going back to that with our Destination Freedom event, and it's going to be a cross-cultural celebration. We have 2 very spectacular hosts. Many people may know from the Haitian community, Mecca Grimo. He's a storyteller and interpreter. He will be here representing Haitian culture. On the other hand, we will have Darius Daughtry. I call him our local poet laureate, but he will be holding it down for the Black American culture. But you're going to have soul food. You're going to have Haitian cuisine. You're going to have compa dancing. You're going to have line dancing with the Super Soul Steppers. Miss Linda Hodges Holloway and her group are going to be here giving lessons and demos. It's going to be a really good time tomorrow night. So tickets are all available for sale through Eventbrite. Hope to see folks here. And then we'll wrap everything up on Saturday, May the 20th. We'll have a celebration in the morning representing Florida's Emancipation Holiday. And it's really important for us. There's been so much activity and focus on Juneteenth now that we have the federal holiday, but not many people know, like I know, I am from Suwannee County up in rural North Florida, and I grew up celebrating what we call May Day. And for nearly 160 years, Florida has had its own emancipation celebration. And we want to make sure that we shine a light on that. While we are very happy about Juneteenth and that extra day off, we will take it. We want to make sure that we don't lose this very important part of our history. And so Saturday will be yet another day to uplift that. We're excited about having the Buffalo Soldiers Motorcycle Club of Miami who will be with us. That's significant because they are the keepers of the flame for the Buffalo Soldiers. What not many people appreciate that what was wrapped up in the Emancipation Proclamation is the ability for Black men to formally enlist in the U.S. Army. And those units that they formed, the 54th and 55th, fought bravely during the war. After the war, they were sent out west to fight against some of our indigenous brothers and sisters. But they really were at the beginning of the ability of Black men to serve this country formally in the military. And so we want to make sure that we're lifting up the legacy of those U.S. colored troops through the Buffalo Soldiers now with the Motorcycle Club. So they'll be here. We'll have a Black marketplace outside. We'll have face painting and crafts for the children in addition to storytelling. I will be on a panel discussing this history with Gene Tenney. Many people know his name.
The artist.
Yeah, Professor Rudy Jean-Bar from Broward College will also be with us. And from Coral Springs, Commissioner Nancy Medier Bowen will be with us. And we'll be talking about this shared history of enslavement and on the one hand, revolution in Haiti, but on the other hand, emancipation in Florida. And then we'll round out the day for the adults with a film screening and panel discussion by a Haitian filmmaker, Yanatha, who's also at Broward College. And so he'll be screening his film, The Sweetest Girl, and talking about his path to filmmaking. So a little bit of something for everyone. Saturday from 11 to 5 is free and open to the public. And it'll round out these 3 days of events. But busy time over here. But if it's anything like we saw tonight, it's going to be a lot of love, a lot of learning, and a lot of cultural exchange. And that's what we're in the business of here at Arlick.
Wow. That blew me away. Okay.
Well, this is powerful, though.
Yeah, we're going to learn when we have doctors and professors come on. We're going to learn how to deal because they
absorb what they do.
Man, once they get it, they got it.
That's and I've been so excited about this weekend at the office. So, guys, all of our viewers out there, go ahead, get online, get your tickets, and we'll see you there. Right.
Now, I do believe that the Friday's night is for adults only, or should I say?
It is adults only, 21 plus. There'll be special beverages. We turned our welcome desk into a little cocktail bar. If anybody's familiar with the destination. So listen, I came in and what I've learned as a community, we have the reputation as the party library, and I don't want to disappoint. So every now and then we'll let you come in and get your groove on.
Turn it up. Because you're on Sistrum. Yeah, we're on Sistrum. Don't go nowhere. Stay right there. You want to bring?
Yeah. So our next guest for tonight is also an author. Her name is Michelle Holinger. She's an author of Understanding Crack-ers, a spiritual approach to comprehending why some white people are so hateful. Michelle is a sociologist who serves as a senior program manager at the Center of Black Innovation. She's a former editor at the South Florida Times, the Miami Times, and additionally, Michelle is a screenwriter. I can go on and on about Michelle. I've listened to her. I saw some of her videos. I saw some of her interviews, and I was just so intrigued by her that I just want to bring her on and kind of let her share a little more about herself and how she's written this book. Oh, this other book that I really want to hear about as well is Sis, You're Worth It. So with no further ado, Michelle Holinger. Welcome, Michelle.
Hi, guys. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Hi, Dr. Hobbs.
Oh, Lord.
So go ahead, Michelle. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, okay. So you mentioned my other book, Sis, You're Worth It. It is a labor of love. I am obsessed with two things, sisterhood and worthiness. And so that book was written a few years ago. Every book that I've written has come about because of my own personal journey, and I'm a writer. And so the way that I process whatever I am navigating my way through, it ends up in a book. And so Sis, You're Worth It is really, really near and dear to my heart. I think that that book is extremely important because unworthiness is this thing that is so freaking subtle, and it informs so many lives without people really being aware of it. And because I took a journey myself from dealing with unworthiness to standing in the truth of my worth, I ended up writing about it. And I realized, okay, so I'm not the only one that's dealing with this because, I'm college educated. I'm pretty sharp, very creative, very spiritual. And so how could I possibly be dealing with unworthiness? But what I realized was I definitely was. I had a business consultant who challenged me on my tendency to undercharge for services and products. And once she called me out and wanted to know what was up with the low prices, the only thing I could say was, see, what had happened was there was no real explanation. But when I sat with it and really started to do the work and peel back the layers, because I've been on a spiritual journey for a really long time, the source just made it very, very clear that it was unworthiness. And so I wrote about it, and I'm just really blessed at how this book has changed so many lives and continues to change lives. Then, like I said, on this spiritual journey for a really long time, and the spiritual journey is what led to my latest book, Understanding Crack-ers.
That's the one. Come on, let's
notice that the way that Crack-ers is spelled has a hyphen in the word, and the hyphen is extremely significant. I was trained as a prayer chaplain at a New Thought Spiritual Center a couple of decades ago. And one of the things that I learned at that spiritual center and at every spiritual center that I've attended is that we're all spiritual beings having this human experience. Everybody. It doesn't pick and choose. Everybody is a spiritual being having this human experience. I had a hard time grappling with that though, because I'm like, well, what about George Zimmerman? What about Derek Chauvin? What about all these other folk who inflict hatred upon other people for no reason whatsoever? How can they be spiritual beings having this human experience? And so I grappled with it a few times over the years. And because I couldn't come up with an answer, I would leave it alone, just kind of let it go and move on and, try to continue with my spiritual development. And then probably about a year and a half ago, it came up again. We're looking at, this whole, the atrocity of George Floyd's murder, and the idea that Derek Chauvin is considered a spiritual being just did something to me. And I sat with it and grappled with it and prayed about it. And it hit me one night after a couple of drinks that everyone is a spiritual being having a human experience, but there are some folk who have a severe crack in their consciousness. They do not know that they're spiritual beings. They do not know. And it's not exclusive to white people, because anybody from any race or a culture can have a crack in their consciousness, but white people are the only ones who operate from that crack in their consciousness in a way that harms other people. In addition to having that crack in their consciousness, the reason that they harm other people is because they've been fed this lie of white supremacy for centuries. There's this other little crinkle in that dynamic because they believe that they have this obligation to protect their so-called supremacy by killing other people, by harming other people, by oppressing other people, by subjugating other people, right? And so as I sat with that and I started to really understand it, it was really overwhelming. Once it started to make sense to me, it was really overwhelming. And so I wasn't clear that this was meant to be a book. I just felt like I was answering a question that I had grappled with for a really long time. But I'm a writer, and the way that source deals with me is it starts whispering, and I start writing, and I get still and allow it to flow. And this book poured through me. And it really blew me away. And one of the things that it helped me to understand is that not all white people are crackers. Not all white people have a crack in their consciousness. We have some tremendous allies. When you think about, where we've been historically, there's some things that could not have moved this country forward without allies, without abolitionists, without, white folk marching in the civil rights movement, without some allies currently doing some of the things that they do to help move the needle. But there's a real strong contingent of crackers, white folk with a crack in their consciousness, who are doing tremendous harm to this country. And they do it under the guise of patriotism, when there's nothing patriotic about it at all, because patriotism means that you love your country. It means that you want the best for your country. It means that you're interested in embracing peace, not violence. It means that you want everybody to be okay in the country. You want everybody to experience the freedom that this country is supposed to stand for. Patriotism does not mean you incite an insurrection and you try to overthrow an election, and that you deny, young students from learning about African American history. That's not patriotism. No. But crackers, with this crack in their consciousness, they're operating from this external reality that says that the hatred is justified. And the way that I maintain my superiority, their so-called superiority, is by harming other people and doing it with what they feel is this free license. So the book is about white people, but essentially it's a love letter to Black people, because ultimately what I want us to understand is that, yes, white people with the crack in their consciousness, they're spiritual beings having this human experience, right? But the crack in their consciousness has them, operating from this deeply flawed reality, right? The thing that's most important for us to remember is that we're also spiritual beings having this human experience. And that's where we get our true power from. And as spiritual beings having this human experience, when we remember that, we can operate in this country without this country defining us, without this country offering us a narrative that we feel like we have to accept and walk in lockstep with. We can really define ourselves. Toni Morrison said that racism is a distraction, and it is, because as long as we're preoccupied with trying to change something that we don't have the power to change, racism is not our problem. It's white folks' problem. As long as we're preoccupied with trying to change it, with fighting against it, there are things that we're not doing to manifest our own best lives. There are things that we're not doing for our own families. There are things we're not doing on a personal level, on a professional level, at the community level, at the nationwide. There are things that we're not doing with that energy that we're wasting on fighting against racism. Does that mean that we want to be okay with racism? Absolutely not. We can want change without fighting against it, right? And the thing that I think is important is for us to remember that we're all born on purpose with a purpose. There are some people who were born to eradicate injustice. The Byron Stevensons of the world, right? I can name a whole slew of the Benjamin Crumps of the world. They were born to do that work, right? Those of us who were not born with that passion, we have an obligation to support them. We have an obligation to support them financially, with moral support, with doing volunteer work, with doing everything in our power to help them to move forward with their work. But our job as a spiritual being is to discover what our unique life purpose is, to discover what our unique gifts and talents are, those things that have our names on them, that will not be expressed if we don't express them. That is our job as spiritual beings. And as long as we're following, trying to figure out white folk and make them behave, we can leave here with a boatload of regrets because we don't use that energy to invest in ourselves and to invest in each other.
Michelle, you've said a mouthful there. You've given us so much to bite on. I want to bring Dr. Hobbs in the conversation as well, but you've given us so much to bite on. And Dr. King and the whole movement's been flashing through my head. Living and knowing our purpose is so vitally important. But when we think about so many of our great leaders that have been taken out, those unknown leaders that were taken out, I mean, it really puts us it puts me in a place that it's hard for me to grapple with as well. But I do understand where you're coming from, and I know my brother has some questions. And again, we want to bring Dr. Hobbs in on this.
Yeah, please, both of you. The thing that gets me, excuse me. How is it that you two, when you're out there mining, mining, mining for this goal, how do you weather the storm that comes from unearthing all of this stuff? Dr. Hobbs, you wrote a tremendous book, Democracy Aboard, Lynching at Home. Okay, and I know, and for me, reading this book, there were some parts in this book that made me want to go out and just, act a fool. You gonna make me act a fool. So how is it that you both, after dealing with all this dirt, how do you cleanse yourself? How do you remain or maintain your sanity?
Well, first, I'd like to just say good evening, Ms. Holinger. Great to see you virtually. I was at your book signing for the Sister Unworthiness book. It was a very powerful read and very necessary conversation. Thank you for what you do. But to your question, Mr. Henry, I think for me, I in writing, and that book started as my dissertation for my graduate work at Florida State University. I, in writing it and rewriting it for the manuscript and talking about it, the one thing that I continue to think about is the work that we do as historians to claim narrative. I've talked to people a lot lately about history is not everything that happens. History is the things that have been preserved. And if you don't preserve it, if you don't tell it, it is really eligible for erasure. And because of the conditions of our lives and our ancestors' lives in particular, when you talk about enslavement, when you talk about the transatlantic slave trade, when you talk about Jim Crow, when you talk about lack of educational opportunities, it means that there's not a lot of written record that we leave behind to tell the stories of our lives. And so there has to be a certain level of intentionality. And the way that has manifested for me in my career has been oral history. You go down, you find the elders, and you sit with them and record their stories, let them talk to you, which ironically is very much a part of our African tradition. We have been a part of oral societies traditionally, but it was in those oral histories that I was able to capture perspectives that were very different than the narrative that I could find in the archives, which were white-controlled newspapers, white-controlled justice systems that assumed the guilt of the Black men and boy that were lynched that I write about in my book. And so for me, what I'm most proud of is that there is an accounting that is accurate, that takes into consideration the voices and perspectives of Black people. And it is incredibly powerful because it differs greatly from what the white people said about what happened in those 4 instances. And I will tell you, in terms of the survival question, for me, it was really much about the research. You're going through the archives, you're plotting your next trip, you're thinking about the next place you need to go to try to find this missing piece of information and new questions that come up. Then you're worried about writing and publishing and all those things. It wasn't until I went to the Legacy Museum and the National Monument for Peace and Justice, Michelle mentioned the name of Bryan Stevenson, that I was actually emotionally overwhelmed. When you walk up on that monument and you see the way that they have physically represented the loss of life, and you consider the scale of it, it's inescapable, the level of inhumanity. In a nation of laws, we credit ourselves that way, but you allow the extralegal murder of nearly 5,000 people over a period of 90 years. That's when it got emotional for me. And in raising 2 young Black boys into manhood, one is 27, one is 17 now, it has really been a part of my work, my social justice work over the years, to try to do something, because unfortunately we're still fighting some of these battles.
Okay. Wow.
And Michelle, I guess same question. How you guys unearth some of what you go through and continue to just be?
I remain grounded spiritually. Coming to this realization of understanding why some white folk can be so hateful understanding that, that there's a significant flaw in their spiritual development was really reassuring for me, because I've always known that there was something wrong with them. I've always known that there was something deeply, deeply flawed, deeply wrong with them. But to come to the understanding that there's this significant crack in their consciousness was reassuring to me, because it really helped me to regain my power. It really helped me to pull it back, and instead of continuing to be preoccupied with, well, what's wrong with them? Why do they hate us so much? Once I started to understand that, I could stop investing any of my energy with trying to understand them, right? One of the other things that started to stir in my consciousness was whether they could mend the crack in their consciousness, right? And I think for a lot of them that, it would be incredibly difficult to do that work, because all of their focus is so external, and they're so rooted in hatred, and they're so that they get rewards from the heinous actions that they involve themselves in. So a lot of them, I think, are just too far gone to pull it back and to recognize what they're really made of at their core. But I found out about a young man whose name is Arno Michaelis, who was the co-founder of the second largest white nationalist group in the country. And over the years, the hatred that he inflicted upon certain groups wasn't returned. And it started to plant little seeds in his consciousness. He started to think about, whether the perception that he had about Black people, the perception that he had about gay people, the perception that he had about the groups that he was inflicting his hatred upon, he started to question, whether it was accurate or not. And then his girlfriend gave birth to a little girl. And when his daughter was born, he said he looked at her innocence, and said, Lord, I do not want this little girl to be exposed to the hatred that I've been inflicting upon other people. And so he started peeling back the layers. He started doing his own work. He ended up meditating. And started to discover that he was dead wrong. Long story short, Arno Michaelis is now doing work to help eradicate racism. He left the white nationalist movement. He is someone who helps others who are trying to get out of that movement by showing them the way. And so he answered my question, that the crack can be mended. I don't think it's going to happen on a widespread, measure, but it's possible. It's certainly possible.
Not quite a Damascus Road moment, but apparently he saw some truth to changing his ways.
As you were presenting about that crack, that kink in the armor, the picture that came to my mind was this. Remember the story about the little boy at the dike? He put his finger in there trying to stop the water from coming out. And when he put his finger in that hole, another hole sprung out over here. He put his hand on it, so he found himself with fingers and toes in all the holes, and still wasn't enough. That's the picture that comes to me. But there is a solution. But I want to go, Dr. Hobbs. Is it Fort Moise or Fort Moose? And give us a little history on that.
Fort Mosaic. Up in the area of St. Augustine. Yes, very important historical site here in Florida. You have to understand the story of Fort Mosaic, which has the significance of being the first sanctioned free Black city, we call it, on these shores. You have to understand a little bit about colonial history. And before the English really got a foothold in what would become the United States, the Spanish were here. Spanish explorers who had come over. They were exported and had amongst them a number of people of color, Juan Garrido and Esteban the Black. We can go into those records and understand that we've always had a presence here, even before slavery. But as the Spanish established St. Augustine in, I believe that was 1565, it's the oldest continuously occupied European city on these shores. And then the English began to take root up in Virginia, and they began to spread into Georgia. There was that European conflict between the two of them. And what the Spanish decided that they would do is to offer freedom to any enslaved Black people who could make their way from a British colony down to where they were. If they were willing to come and to convert to Catholicism, that they would be declared free. And so even when you look at the Stono Rebellion in the early 1600s, we now know that those were Angolan soldiers who had been exposed to the Catholics who had been trading in the slave trade there. And they understood enough when they heard the rumors about Spanish Florida being just south of them in South Carolina, they struck out for freedom. Now, unfortunately for them, they were not successful, but that's just one example of a group of Black people attempting to make their way to Spanish Florida. And what the Spanish did, again, because it's not always love for Black folks, they were very interested in using these free Black people as a buffer. And so Fort Mosaic was just that. It was a fort that was occupied by these freed Black folks who made a bargain that they would help defend the white people in St. Augustine from any encroachment by the British. So some very, very powerful history there. And as we celebrate these emancipation holidays, I think one of the things I always like to uplift is that even though May 20th, 1865, and the fact of the Civil War was really important, you have to know that slavery was an unnatural condition and that Black people have always fought to get free from it. And the story of Fort Mosaic is just one example of the ways and the negotiations and the method. By any means necessary, we were willing to strike out and do what was available to us to be free and live as free people.
Okay. Can we do this, Dave? Can we do this? Ariel, our technical expert, can we show a little bit of that film? Is it up? Can we do it? Were we able to pull it down?
Mm-hmm. And while she works on that, we'll continue our conversation and she'll key us in when it's ready. Dr. Hobbs, is there any truth to the matter as well? And I know this was probably sometime later that enslaved Africans also fled south to the indigenous people, to the indigenous tribes, some of the Seminoles.
Oh, absolutely. When you look, by the time we get to the the early 1800s, you're going to have the Spanish lose the Spanish-American War, the conflict that was there. The Spanish are going to eventually turn Florida over. The United States is going to claim it as a territory. And that's when you're going to see further encroachment into the South. This is the era of General Andrew Jackson, who really made his career as a Indian killer and a fighter against Blacks in that region. But the United States, once they've acquired Florida as a territory, are going to embark on a series of wars that we call the First, Second, and Third Seminole Wars. And in particular, when you read the accounts of the Second Seminole Wars, what you will find is that these U.S. Military leaders are writing home and writing reports that, they're essentially fighting a Negro war, that there are so many runaway Blacks who have taken up and are living among the Seminole Indians who are now fighting with them, that some historians have even called the Second Seminole War one of the largest slave rebellions that had ever been fought. And so there's some very powerful history of connection and collaboration and resistance to United States encroachment by both Black and Indigenous people here in the state of Florida.
That's so interesting. Osceola and I don't know if it's a true account, but was his wife Black? Was she Black?
That it is widely believed that King Osceola, who was a leader of the Seminoles, actually, I believe began the First or Second Seminole War, because his wife, the woman he considered to be his wife, was a Black woman who had been a fugitive from slavery. And she was recaptured and returned to her owner. And so part of the reason he was willing to fight was because
he had my woman.
She had been taken from me. We do some crazy things for love, right?
See that?
In this case, this was I guess what we call an interracial love affair that sparked some very serious warfare. So yes, there's truth to that.
Okay.
They fought hard too, didn't they?
That's my woman.
Yes.
I want my woman. Was Ariel okay? So we can't pull that up, and it was highlighting the event on Saturday. That video that was in that piece, So we couldn't pull it up. All right. Let's see. Dr. Holinger.
Yes.
Had I not read a little further about the cracker, my mind immediately went to slavery with this white man on a horse and this whip, and that's where my mind went. And then when I read and got the spiritual understanding of what you were explaining, it brought on a whole new picture. So what do you call do you call us black crackers? When we have that kink in our armor, what are we?
You know what? I have not given that any thought. I have not coined a phrase to describe other ethnicities and races who have cracks in their consciousness, because we don't resort to violence based on the crack in our consciousness. We typically, any non-white person with a crack in their consciousness, there's usually some self-implosion that happens. There's some self-limitation that happens as a result of the crack in the consciousness.
Okay,
now you don't resort to violence against other folks.
Now I gotta go back to something that I say, but I'm gonna tone this down.
You've opened a can of worms.
Yeah, I'm gonna tone this down. This is what I say about us, and when I say us, I want you in your mind to use the N word. We are better at being crackers than crackers are.
You're gonna have to break that down for me.
Yeah, we have assimilated. We have assimilated to the point that kink, that thing that separated us from them, it seemed to be, it is coming together. So it's kind of hard to remember when you used to be able to just say, okay, based upon the crime that was committed, we would think to ourselves, well, I know no black person ain't do that. You would always say that was a white person crime. And now what you see is, shoot, who did it? So that was my reason for saying, what do you call that? I'm not.
We're sad to say what we saw in Memphis really
that was
took us there.
One part.
But in part of your narrative here in the title of the book, it talks about comprehending, and when I hear comprehending, I'm looking for solutions as well, or something there that's going to help us to, as people of color, to not only figure out our opposition, but to help us work on ourselves as well. Would you agree?
Absolutely. The thing that I want us to really hone in on is the fact that we're spiritual beings having a human experience, right? And spiritual law is precise. Spiritual law does not concern itself with a narrative, right? And so I could have been in a fight with somebody who fought, in a really unfair way. They beat me down, and I could be terribly angry with them and have resentment, etc. If I carry that throughout my life, and I'm bogged down with this resentment, with this anger, my reason for feeling that anger and that resentment is justified. They beat me up. My anger is justified. Spiritual law does not recognize my justification. Spiritual law only recognizes my resentment and my anger and a response to that energy. And so it's important for us to always go back to self, to always recognize that we're spiritual beings having this human experience, and to make a decision that we are not going to waste our energy on resentment, anger, hatred, stooping to their level, meeting them where they are. This isn't to say that we should deny how we feel when certain things happen, but we can't take up residence in that anger. We can't take up residence in that resentment, because it harms us. It doesn't harm them. They might not even know we feel that way. It harms us. It prevents us from standing in our truth. It prevents us from manifesting our best life. It prevents us from being all that we can be for ourselves, for our families, for our communities. It prevents us from doing everything that we're meant to do. So the most important thing is for us to remember we're spiritual beings having this human experience, and that spiritual law is precise. When you look at everything that we've been subjected to, when you look at everything that they've done to us, that we have accomplished everything that we have, sometimes it really blows my mind. It gets me emotional. It's astonishing.
Yes.
We are an amazing people. We are an amazing people, but I really believe that we've only scratched the surface, because when we recognize that this playing field that we keep trying to navigate wasn't made for us anyway, and we remember that we're spiritual beings having this human experience, and that there's a different kind of field of infinite intelligence that we can draw from and allow it to propel us forward.
Okay,
that conversation right there gets me excited.
This is Mental Health Month, right?
Yes, it is.
This is Mental Health Month.
It should be metaphysics.
Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
Now we're moving into another round.
I know, but
move to another round.
This is what we've seen.
This is good.
We've seen situations where families have forgiven, the murderers of their children, and literally prayed for them and embraced them. And these are the type of things that move me, because they did not use that energy in retaliation in a negative manner. And as hard as it is for many of us to see that and understand it and comprehend it, I've heard so many people say, I couldn't do it.
It is.
It just goes to show we got a lot of spiritual growth.
I actually believe in some of those situations that public display of forgiveness was premature, because I think that forgiveness is a process, and it's okay for us to be angry. It's okay for us to feel, total despair. It's okay, and to move through those emotional stages and eventually get to forgiveness. I think is a much healthier approach than an immediate jump to forgiveness.
Right.
And I don't think that that's actually forgiveness. I think that that's a willingness to forgive, but I don't think that they've actually worked through the process, worked through the anger, worked through the despair to actually get to the forgiveness process. I think it's a worthy journey. But I think that in a lot of those cases where families immediately jump to forgiveness, that they've done themselves a disservice, because they haven't given themselves permission to grieve and to really feel and to experience the anger and eventually get to the forgiveness.
Okay. I want to thank that viewer who said he was a comment.
Spoke about this comment.
Oh yeah, what he said was Kathy Steele. I'm not sure, but that person said, this is exactly the type of conversations we should be having in our communities. Awesome. So, Dr. Hobbs, a night at the library, we got to have some of this type of dialogue. I know you're doing it already, but
no, there's always opportunity to do more and to go deeper. And I really appreciate Michelle's analysis. I do work with the South Florida People of Color as an anti-racist educational operation, and we talk about this a lot. We talk about the psychology of racism, the social construct of racism that is incredibly powerful. And I think it's really important for us to do that work, to understand it, to understand the mindset. And frankly, that's part of the cultural battles that we're fighting here in the state of Florida. when you hear people talking about critical race theory is nothing more than Black and brown scholars of color who have invested time over a generation to study racism and to study the law and to study its operations. And in those investigations, they have come up with and decoded in some ways the DNA of racism in our society. And if you know, to use a medical analogy, once you can decode that DNA, you can get very precise about the types of the treatments that you apply to it. And so being able to name the phenomena of the construction of whiteness, there's nothing special about you except that there's a legal process that protects you. When you talk about microaggressions and the role that they play on the mental health and stress of people who receive them, when you talk about things like intersectionality and layers of burden and oppression and marginalization that people employ, you can then begin to address those things in a very targeted way. That's what they don't want. And so that's what we're fighting this. And so I think it's always a good thing for us to be having these conversations about the problems that we're facing. The one thing that gives me courage during these days when there's attacks on academic freedom and the freedom to read is that is part of our history too. We have had to take our learning underground and be secret about what we were doing. We've had to create our own outlets. We wouldn't have the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, founded by the great Dr. Carter G. Woodson, if he hadn't had the vision that we can do for self. We can be a self-determined people, even when it comes to the creation of knowledge and education. And so always grateful to have this. It is the beauty of Black culture and Black history that is often the salve for me when dealing with so much of this ugliness that Michelle is describing and that I've written about. As she talked about just the awesomeness of our ability to endure and overcome. And that's what is at the core of these celebrations this week, as we've survived. We've survived America. And if our ancestors can do it, we owe it to them to take advantage of their sacrifice and their perseverance to continue to claim our part in this society and in this world.
That's a good segue to. That's it. That's a good segue to end the program.
Very powerful.
But let's hear from you, Ms. Holinger. Your closing thoughts, Dr. Hobbs. That was great. You brought it all the way home. You even slid in your activities, so that was good.
I always love sharing sacred space with Sister Hobbs. She is so brilliant, and I love listening to her drop this wisdom. I just want to thank you guys for allowing us to get on here and to discuss this really, really, really important content. I think that as this country continues to spiral out of control, as far as racial dynamics are concerned, I think it's extremely important for us to harness our power and to pour it into ourselves, to pour it into each other, to just stand in that truth that we're spiritual beings having this human experience. Yeah. When you move into that direction, there are things about yourself that you will discover that you can't discover any other way. And when you spend some time in meditation, when you understand the power of your thoughts, when you make a shift to embracing gratitude in your life, because you understand the power of your thoughts, and when you invest in gratitude, it helps you to change that energy around your thoughts. We can start to improve dynamics in ourselves, in our communities, in our families, by making those kinds of investments in our spiritual nature and understanding that we're spiritual beings having this human experience.
Very good. Well, Brother Wright.
Well, I'm just going to let you close us out tonight. Okay. The depth of this conversation.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's been awesome. It's when you have a chance to be next to brilliance, it's it brings light to a dull situation. So this what I'm about to quote, it comes from the Sailor website. African Americans have resisted historic and ongoing oppression in all forms, especially the racial terrorism of lynching, the racial pogroms. Now, I had to look that word up. It's not programs, it's pogroms. And it's an organized massacre of a particular ethnic group the police killings, and since our arrival upon these shores, these efforts have been to advocate for dignified, self-determined life in a just democratic society in the United States and beyond the United States. And because of you sisters and those that came before you and those that are alongside of you, and for those who are yet to come, we are forever indebted and will be forever grateful for you, for your uncovering of our history and bringing it to life to live right before us, and that we may emulate it. It's like that rose that grows in the sewer. Its roots are so deep that it goes beneath the mess. Its stem is so tall and its head never is in it. It's above all the mess. So we thank you for allowing us to see that we can be a rose in the sewer. It's all good in the hood. God bless you both, and may we do this again. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Thank you, Mr. Wright. Appreciate the platform.
Thank you.
Thank you.